For years, many Americans have lived, worked, and traveled abroad without issues. However, in 2025, several countries are making it increasingly difficult or outright impossible for Americans to stay. From diplomatic tensions to strict new laws, some nations have ramped up their efforts to detain, deport, or block entry for U.S. citizens. In some cases, American expats are being pressured to leave, while others are outright barred from returning. Today, we're counting down the 10 countries where Americans are being forced to leave or avoid entirely. And before we get started, don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on more engaging content. Let's get started.
Number 10. Myanmar, Burma.
The political turmoil following the 2021 military coup has led to the detention of foreign nationals, including Americans, often on vague charges. The U.S. government has issued advisories against travel to the region due to the risk of arbitrary enforcement of local laws. Since the military seized power in Myanmar in 2021, the country has become increasingly dangerous for foreign nationals, especially Americans. The U.S. Department of State has issued Level 4 travel advisories, warning citizens against traveling to the region due to political instability and the risk of arbitrary detention. Several American citizens have been detained on vague charges, with reports indicating that authorities often use national security laws as a pretext for imprisonment. In some cases, foreigners have been arrested simply for criticizing the government online or associating with pro-democracy activists. The Myanmar military regime has been known to use detained foreigners as bargaining chips in diplomatic negotiations, making it extremely risky for Americans to remain in the country. The unpredictable legal system means that even minor infractions, such as overstaying a visa, can lead to prolonged imprisonment. Human rights organizations have expressed concerns over the treatment of foreign detainees, with reports of harsh prison conditions, restricted communication, and prolonged legal proceedings. Due to the growing number of foreign arrests and rising anti-Western sentiment, many American expats have already left Myanmar, with the U.S. Embassy urging citizens to depart as soon as possible. If tensions continue to escalate, Myanmar could soon become completely off-limits for American travelers and residents. Number 9. Cuba. While relations between the U.S. and Cuba have fluctuated, there have been instances where American citizens faced arbitrary detention or travel restrictions, especially those engaging in activities deemed sensitive by the Cuban government. Cuba has long had a complicated relationship with the United States, and recent political developments have made it even more difficult for Americans to stay in the country. In the past, Americans living or traveling in Cuba have faced sudden visa cancellations, arrest, or restricted movement, particularly those involved in journalism, activism, or business dealings that the government views as politically sensitive. Although diplomatic relations between Cuba and the U.S. have shifted over the years, American citizens remain at risk of arbitrary detainment and harassment by Cuban authorities. In some cases, visitors have been detained for simply possessing U.S. government-related materials or engaging in humanitarian aid work. The Cuban government has also tightened visa regulations, making it harder for U.S. nationals to enter and stay legally. Some American expats have reported being denied residency renewals, forcing them to leave the country unexpectedly. Since 2024, Cuba has increased surveillance on foreign nationals, particularly Americans, leading to concerns that visitors could be detained for minor infractions or held as leverage in political disputes. With relations between the U.S. and Cuba once again deteriorating, Americans are being advised to limit travel or consider leaving altogether. If the situation worsens, Cuba may soon become one of the least accessible countries for U.S. citizens. Number 8. Egypt. The Egyptian government has occasionally detained foreign nationals, including Americans, particularly those involved in activism or journalism, citing national security concerns. Such incidents have prompted travel advisories and diplomatic interventions. Egypt is a popular destination for tourists, but for American expats and journalists, the country is becoming increasingly hostile. The Egyptian government has a history of detaining foreign nationals under national security laws, particularly those who are involved in activism, investigative reporting, or human rights advocacy. Americans have been arrested on suspicion of espionage, often without clear evidence, and some have been held in detention for months without trial. This has led to frequent diplomatic interventions from the U.S. government. In recent years, the Egyptian government has also cracked down on foreign NGOs and humanitarian workers, with many American expats being forced to leave due to restrictions on their activities. The U.S. State Department has issued heightened travel advisories for Egypt, warning Americans about the risk of arbitrary detention and restricted legal protections. Additionally, visa policies have become stricter, with some Americans reporting difficulties in obtaining or renewing their residency permits. For many U.S. citizens living in Egypt, the growing risk of detainment and deportation is making it an unsafe place to stay. Number 7. Turkey. In the aftermath of the 2016 coup attempt, Turkey has detained several foreign nationals, including Americans, on charges of terrorism or espionage, often with limited evidence. These actions have led to diplomatic tensions and warnings for travelers. Turkey has been a key U.S. ally in the past, but in recent years, relations have soured, leading to increased risks for American travelers and residents. Since the failed coup attempt in 2016, Turkey has arrested multiple foreign nationals, including Americans, under vague accusations of espionage or involvement in anti-government activities. One high-profile case was that of Andrew Brunson, an American pastor who was detained for over 2 years on dubious terrorism charges, sparking a diplomatic crisis between Turkey and the U.S. While many American expats live in Turkey without issues, arbitrary detentions remain a concern, particularly for those involved in politics, journalism, or religious work. The Turkish government has also introduced stricter visa regulations, making it more difficult for American nationals to stay long-term without facing bureaucratic hurdles. The U.S. government has repeatedly warned its citizens about the risks of travel to Turkey, and many American residents have opted to leave due to safety concerns. With political tensions continuing to rise, Turkey is becoming an increasingly dangerous place for U.S. citizens to live or visit. Number 6. Venezuela. Political instability and strained U.S.-Venezuela relations have resulted in the detention of American citizens on charges that are often politically motivated. Travel advisories caution against non-essential travel to the region. Venezuela has long been a politically unstable country, but in recent years, it has become even more dangerous for Americans. The Venezuelan government has repeatedly used foreign nationals as political pawns, with multiple Americans being detained under dubious charges. Since diplomatic ties between Venezuela and the United States have deteriorated significantly, the risk of arbitrary arrest has increased. In many cases, American citizens have been accused of espionage or conspiracy against the government without solid evidence. In 2023, several U.S. citizens, including oil executives, were imprisoned in Venezuela under questionable legal circumstances. These detentions have led to major diplomatic efforts by Washington to secure their release. Travel to Venezuela is already difficult, as the U.S. has no direct diplomatic presence in the country, meaning that Americans in distress have limited consular support if they get into trouble. The economic collapse of Venezuela has also contributed to rising crime rates, with foreigners often targeted for kidnappings or extortion. Even American citizens with legal residency have been pressured to leave the country due to growing insecurity. As tensions between the two nations remain high, Venezuela is becoming one of the most dangerous places for Americans to live, work, or even visit in 2025. Number 5. North Korea. Travel to North Korea by U.S. citizens is heavily restricted, and those who have entered have occasionally been detained under various pretexts, leading to diplomatic challenges. North Korea has long been one of the most hostile countries toward Americans, and the U.S. government has outright banned most travel to the country due to security risks. Over the years, multiple American citizens have been detained in North Korea, often accused of crimes such as espionage or anti-state activities, which can include something as simple as leaving a Bible in a hotel room. The most infamous case was Otto Warmbier, a U.S. student who was arrested in 2016 for allegedly stealing a propaganda poster. He was sentenced to 15 years of hard labor and tragically died shortly after being returned to the U.S. in 2017 under mysterious circumstances. North Korea's government often uses detained foreigners as leverage in diplomatic negotiations, making it an extremely dangerous place for any American to travel. The few Americans who have managed to legally enter are closely monitored at all times, and even minor infractions can lead to imprisonment. With tensions between the U.S. and North Korea remaining high, the country is considered one of the most dangerous places for any American citizen. As a result, North Korea continues to be off-limits for U.S. travelers, with little hope of improvement in the near future. Number 4. Iran. Iran has a history of detaining foreign nationals, particularly those with dual citizenship, on charges of espionage or undermining national security. These detentions are often viewed as political leverage. Iran has become increasingly hostile to American visitors, particularly those with Iranian-American dual citizenship, as they are often seen as potential spies or threats to the regime. Several Americans have been arbitrarily detained in Iran under espionage charges, with many receiving long prison sentences despite weak or no evidence. In recent years, Iran has used detained U.S. citizens as bargaining chips in negotiations with Washington, leading to tense diplomatic standoffs. One of the most notable cases was that of journalist Jason Rezaian, who was imprisoned for 544 days before being released as part of a prisoner swap in 2016. The Iranian government strictly controls foreign visitors, and any American traveling there faces the risk of immediate arrest, particularly if they have past involvement in journalism, activism, or politics. Due to ongoing U.S.-Iran tensions, the risk of detention and mistreatment of Americans in Iran remains dangerously high. For this reason, Americans have been strongly advised to avoid travel to Iran, making it one of the most restrictive and dangerous countries for U.S. citizens in 2025. Number 3. China. The Chinese government has employed exit bans and detentions of foreign nationals, including Americans, often in response to international disputes or as a means of exerting pressure. China is one of the world's largest economies, but for American citizens, it has become an increasingly risky place to live or visit. In recent years, China has implemented exit bans, which prevent certain foreigners, including Americans, from leaving the country. These bans are often used as retaliation in political disputes between China and the U.S. Multiple Americans have been detained or had their passports confiscated while in China, often with little explanation or warning. These individuals are sometimes held for months or even years without a clear legal process. The U.S. government has warned citizens about the increased use of arbitrary detentions, particularly against business executives and academics with ties to sensitive industries. Some American businesses have begun relocating operations outside of China due to fears that executives could be detained or banned from leaving as part of economic disputes. With U.S.-China relations growing increasingly tense, China has become one of the most dangerous places for American expatriates and travelers in 2025. Number 2. Russia. Amid heightened geopolitical tensions, Russia has detained foreign nationals, including Americans, as leverage in diplomatic negotiations. Such actions have led to strained relations and advisories against travel to Russia. Since the Russia-Ukraine war began, the Russian government has cracked down on foreign nationals, including Americans, using them as bargaining tools in diplomatic disputes. Several Americans have been arrested on espionage charges, including journalists and business executives, often with little or no evidence. One of the most high-profile cases is that of Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, who was arrested in 2023 on accusations of espionage and remains detained under vague charges. The U.S. government has issued severe travel advisories against visiting Russia, warning that any American in the country could be arbitrarily detained. Americans living in Russia have reported increased surveillance and harassment by authorities, making it clear that they are no longer welcome. With diplomatic relations between the U.S. and Russia at their lowest point in decades, it's becoming nearly impossible for Americans to safely remain in the country. Number 1. Saudi Arabia. In recent years, Saudi authorities have detained individuals, including dual Saudi-American citizens, for expressing dissenting views. Notably, Saad Al-Mahdi, a 74-year-old Florida retiree, was detained over critical social media posts and faced pressure to renounce his U.S. citizenship. Saudi Arabia has become an increasingly dangerous place for Americans, particularly those who express political opinions critical of the regime. Several dual Saudi-American citizens have been detained for social media posts made years ago, even while in the United States, highlighting the Saudi government's extreme surveillance measures. The case of Saad Al-Mahdi, a 74-year-old U.S. citizen detained for tweets critical of the government, has raised alarms among American expatriates in the country. Reports indicate that some detainees have been pressured to renounce their U.S. citizenship in exchange for their release, effectively forcing them to choose between freedom and nationality. Saudi Arabia remains a key U.S. ally, But its recent actions have made it one of the most dangerous places for Americans to express their views. With growing restrictions and risks, Saudi Arabia tops the list of countries forcing Americans to return home in 2025. From Saudi Arabia's crackdown on dissent to Russia's political detentions, these 10 countries have made it increasingly difficult for Americans to stay. Which country surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and explore Globe Discoveries for more global insights. Thank you for watching.